have an agenda in front of us. Paul?
I move the approval of the agenda as prepared.
Jim?
I think you have to, I could retract my motion since it hasn't been seconded. I move that we approve the agenda as prepared, including the HR agenda. Addenda.
Okay. All those in favor of proceeding with the agenda as presented with the HR addendum, please vote by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. Recognition of the audience. Nobody has signed up to formally address the board, but we don't want to assume that everybody knows our protocols. If you would like to address the board at this time, kind of give me a nod. All right. Next item, staff reports. We have, nobody's here from the FEA. So we have Gross, Agri, and Lehman talking about teacher principal new evaluation models. Who would like to head us off?
I will take that one.
Okay.
I'm going to borrow Dr. Gross's computer here. All right. Additionally, with this, there is a paper document in front of you that has what we call a learning map on it that I will have you utilize during this time. And what we want to share with you tonight is something that we've been working on all year, and I have been reporting out in little doses about our new evaluation model that we will be full implementation with next school year. And just to tie it to the work that we do as administration with you as a school board, this ties to EL6, which we reported out on last time we were together, and talking about how we consistently utilize employee performance. And also, the reason that we've made the shift this year is because of the requirement at the Department of Public Instruction. They have required all districts in the state to adopt a new teacher or choose from an evaluation model that they have already reviewed, and to make that decision by June 1st of 2014. So we started this process last summer, and that it needs to be implemented by next fall and September 1st. So we brought a committee together in June, and as you can see up on the screen, it's a very diverse mix of principals, teachers. We have representation with David Marquardt from North Dakota United. We have our mentor induction program because we're really looking at what this means for our new teachers as well. And then Cheryl, myself, and Dr. Gross have been working together to lead that throughout the school year. I don't think that this committee knew that this was going to be a long-term commitment, but this will probably be another 2 to 3 years, as it's a pretty big endeavor, but we have a really great group that's been wonderful to work with. So this is just a little bit of information about the change, because we currently use the Danielson model, and the Danielson model was on the approved list from the Department of Public Instruction. So when we started to meet last year, we talked about why change. I'm sure you've heard from teachers at all levels that we continuously change, and they like things to stay the same. And so we did really look at the history of the Danielson model, and two things led the conversation of changing it. That we had really went away from the fidelity of the Danielson model. It's a 4 domains, that language, 4 topics, categories, and we had added to that based on our own needs in the district. It was very narrative based, so if Dr. Gross was to evaluate a teacher and I was evaluating the same teacher, there was so much narrative making it subjective that we really felt like we needed to go back and look for consistency. And sometimes if you say, well, we're going to go back to the integrity of the model, it doesn't heighten people's awareness enough to really think that they need to pay attention. So that was part of the decision, and there was a lot of research behind the Marzano model. We've read texts by Bob Marzano in the last 5 to 10 years about instructional strategies that work, and the big thing for our instructional team was that this is directly tied to increasing student achievement. So what this talks about is the term deliberate practice, and it's really going into classrooms and labeling instructional strategies and labeling through the lens of what you're seeing the teacher do that's directly impacting students. And there's a lot of research with this model that you can make incremental gains of 2 years with kids if you increase teachers' strategies and to deliberate practice. So it's really labeling and growth for teachers to really increase student achievement. So one of the words we talk a lot about is common language, and within the Marzano model, and you'll see that on your learning map, we're really going back and we're taking a slow look at what language we're using to label instruction. One of our candidates today in an interview talked about all of the acronyms of education and education speak, that people don't understand what we're saying, and oftentimes the way I will label something, Cheryl will label it something completely different, and we're confusing the teacher. So if we think about this, when you think about what makes a vacation awesome, what do you picture in your head? Okay. You might think about sun, being on the beach, an adventure, a cruise, a museum, your family, but we don't know what awesome is. So through the Marzano model, it's giving us that common language that we know what good instructional practice is. This is something similar to what we've shared with our administrators over the past couple years, and they would probably laugh if they saw this, because we talk a lot about strategic planning. We're all trying to have that umbrella. We're all headed in the same direction, and that as we bring new initiatives on board, that they're all helping us move towards that common good, the big picture at the end. And through common language of instruction, that will impact the conversation of our PLCs. It'll be our next initiative we bring on board. We've talked with principals about next year. They want to know what the Marzano training looks like. And we've told them, we want you to first identify what are your goals, what are you working on, and then we will align the elements of the Marzano model to go alongside with and to support what you're trying to do with your teachers. So we want all of those arrows to be aligned. And this is just a great quote by Richard Elmore. One of the greatest barriers to school improvement is the lack of an agreed upon definition of what high quality instruction looks like. And that's really the purpose of the Marzano tool. It's not an evaluation to catch teachers. It's not something to tell them they're doing something wrong. It's labeling high quality instruction, because if we can label it for a teacher, they're very likely to sustain it and to repeat that strategy. This is just a quick overview of what the model looks like, and just to show you how this compares to the Danielson model. This is different than the sheet in front of you, because this sheet has two sides, so it's hard to put up on the screen. But what this is emulating is that there are 4 domains. So if you look at the front page with the purple, the green, and the rust, if you will, that's domain 1. And then the back side is domain 2 through 4. And that's what's showing up on the slide. This is a lot of information, and to adopt this model is not something we're going to do in 1 year. So there's been questions from staff about, well, it says full implementation by September of 2015. Does that mean we're doing all of this? We have an implementation plan to move it forward. It may take us 3 to 5 years. So if we look at what that looks like in comparison to the Danielson model, it's really not that different. So I've just aligned those 4 domains. They're very similar. So just a quick walkthrough of what these look like, and you can refer to your learning map that's in front of you as well. But in domain 1, which is where our focus will be next year, we talk about the middle being that content. That's why teachers go into education. Of elementary teachers, oftentimes it's I love kids. High school teachers, I love math. It's that whole content pieces in the middle. On each side, it's all that classroom management and relationships. So really, domain 1 is a biggie that we think if we start there next year, we will really improve instruction, and the rest of it can come alongside. Domain 2 is something that's been a big push within our Danielson model, and we will work with this with our new teachers, even though it's not a focus of evaluation next year. And we're adopting several new curriculums in the next few years, so talking about that lesson preparation, how do you plan your day, what does that look like? Domain 3, again, I'm sure you heard that when Joelle was here with the mentor program, the whole idea of being reflective practice. If you go every day and you repeat exactly what you did the day before, or you have last year's lesson plans, that's the definition of insanity. You'll never get different results if you continue to do the same thing. So we've really prompted teachers and principals to be reflective in their practice. And domain 4 is the whole piece about professionalism, collegiality. How are they behaving as an adult with other adults in their work environment? Are they contributing members at the PLC table? So again, this is domain 1 as a whole up front. If you look at this, the Marzano model is based on a text that Bob Marzano wrote titled The Art and Science of Teaching. And I love that title because it's something that's been my mantra for many years of, Yes, you can go in and be this creative, artistic teacher, but there is a science to what we do. It can't just be all the art. And if we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum across our district, which what our kids deserve, that's the science piece. And the art is what makes it look different from colleague to colleague. And Dr. Marzano has captured that. So within his 10-chapter book, there are 10 design questions, and you'll see the way that this is set up, and it's on your learning map in front of you, that each of those lesson segments is set up into a design question, and each of those is a chapter that we've been reading together this year as a strategist and facilitator group. 9 of the 10 questions are in Domain 1, and the 10th question is in Domain 2. And then the numbered elements on your learning map, those are elements that we look for when we're in classrooms. And there are 60 total in the model, 41 of them are in Domain 1. So again, we're gonna go slow to learn this because that's a lot, even in 1 year of just Domain 1. This pulls apart Domain 1 a little bit further. So if you look at your learning map and you look at the segments of the green, the purple, and the burgundy, those are lesson segments. And the first category to your left, those are the routine events every day, that classroom management, setting up your routines, your rules, your procedures. Marzano calls those the appetizers. Again, in the middle, the content, the bulk of what we teach, that's the entree, and enacted on the spot. That's really the art of teaching, the unpredictability of what are kids bringing to school with them on a daily basis. What happened at home last night? Did they have breakfast? What kind of attitudes am I going to face? Enacted on the spot, that's the dessert. Instead of having it be something that I'm being reactive, teach teachers to be proactive and have more tools in their toolkit so they can be proactive with kids. Again, there's 9 design questions in Domain 1 and 41 elements. So, what's the work that we've done this year as a team so far? This school year, we've had the principals together for 2 days of implementation on the framework. And the purpose of that was to really help them start seeing what the design of the model is, and that it's about intentional teaching, really focusing on those lesson segments, and to really get them thinking about that common language. And we have to let go of some of our old terms and start speaking the same language of the model. Oh, Bob, I don't know what I just did. We lost my connection. All right. Nope, it didn't go. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Additionally, we have determined what we are measuring for next year. And this is kind of a lot of information, but I've been talking about Domain 1. And we've talked a lot about the difference between what's measured, because there are scales and rubrics tied to this model. And to come in and say, well, it's only Domain 1, that's 41 elements. We don't want to catch teachers by surprise. We want them to know when we come in, this is likely what we're going to provide feedback on. So if you look again at your map, we will be looking at 5, 6, 7, and 8. And the reason these are in odd order, so you'll see 6 is on the left-hand side under Design Question 1 in the green column. These are in order, they're numbered because of the chapter of the text this was based on. So Design Question 6 is Chapter 6 of Marzano's text. Yet when they put it into a framework in the way that the menu works out, they're out of order. So we look at 6, and that's paired very well with 7 on the far right side. And we've talked about within the frame of a school year, in the fall, we'd really be looking to come in to say, have you established those rules, those procedures? Are you explicit with kids? Are they posted? Are you practicing them? And then by January through May, Design Question 7, how am I adhering to those? Am I celebrating with kids? Am I holding them accountable? You can only hold them accountable if you practice them and made them evident. So those two very much mirror and pair with each other. And then we've talked about engagement being the key. You can be the most fabulous teacher in the world and know your content, but if no one's paying attention to you, you're wasting your time. And that student engagement is huge key to student achievement. And then Design Question 8, we've really worked with our principals this year about that importance of culture and climate, and that starts first and foremost in the classroom with our teachers. And are they maintaining and establishing relationships with all kids? So those are the things that we'll be looking at next year. However, all of Domain 1 will be open for principals to come in and have a conversation with teachers about, provide narrative feedback, but we will only be counting these towards their evaluation, if that makes sense. This again is the map, and here they are laid out for you to see that it is still a big chunk. This is 17 elements, so even though it's only 4 design questions, it's 17 elements, and within those elements, each element is pulled apart to look like the screen here. So when a principal comes in, the tool that we are adopting along with this is called iObservation, and it's a software application that we've been working with the principals on this year within a pilot. Each principal has picked 1 to 5 teachers this year across the district that have agreed to pilot the software, to come in and give them feedback. Some of them have said, I would like this used as part of my formal evaluation. Some of them said, I just want practice. I don't want that to really go in my file. So we've really let the teachers lead this. But just to let you see how an element can become so large, but also the common language. This one is from Domain 1. It's in the lesson segment on that front page of routine events, which is the green column on the left. The design question is about maintaining rules and procedures, which is design question 6. Under design question 6, you'll see there's 2 elements, element 4 and 5. This one is specifically just to element 4, about establishing and maintaining classroom routines. And then when a principal goes in, there's a checkbox. It's not an all-inclusive list. It's evidences. It's things that they can say, yes, I saw this, yes, I saw this, again, to that common language. And so we can all say, what does it mean when we're establishing and maintaining those routines? It looks like this. So it's the common language. Underneath that piece is the scale that we talked about of what they're measuring. And what's unique to the Marzano tool is there is a different scale for every element within the model. And you'll notice that for applying, which is our goal for all teachers to be at the level of applying, in order to do that, you'll see the language of applying, a level 3, or innovating, a level 4. It has to be evident in students. In every one of the scales, you'll see at a 3 and a 4 students. So again, if you're not making that impact with your students, you can't be beyond developing. And that will be a change for our teachers. And finally, just so you can sum up where we're at with this, it's really a partnership with our teachers. It's been a great work with David being a representative, as well as Joelle with the mentor program. And our goal really is to increase student achievement, to really get that common language of instruction to improve student achievement. We want to support all teachers and students, increase our own expertise as learners. And we know that we're going to have to work out the kinks as we go. So we are going to go slow and do it well. Some of the other things to think about, I think we tend to box in evaluation. There's other purposes for it as well. We talk a lot about being short subs because of the need for professional development, and how do we determine what professional development is most important. This will help us because we'll be able to run reports at the end of the year of what our principals seeing in classrooms, and if we're consistently seeing low scores in certain areas, then we know those will be targets for professional development following up. Again, it'll be that common language, and not just common language of our administrators. We want our teachers to talk the talk of common language, what instructional strategies. Our Teach to Learn system, we shared with you this year of how many courses we're offering and how many categories. We want to tie the Marzano model into that, so when you propose a course, you will click on the design question. So we are being very purposeful in tying that in as not some other thing out here called teacher evaluation. We also want to talk about that we're using this to design those experiences and to link up with our teacher and induction program. And again, Joelle has been part of that and very integral. Kirby, you'll see had an asterisk next to his name. He's kind of an ad hoc committee member. He's helped us to develop a website, and it's been great for us to have a little pressure from Kirby of what's new. It's getting a little old. Do you have anything to add on there? And the committee's been wonderful about taking feedback and providing answers to people's feedback. So it's an internal site. If you go to the building sites, you'll see that little guy on the side. We've been putting talking points up as we make decisions. We're putting them up there. Presentations are posted, as well as some of our principals actually videotaped doing the presentation. So if I need to present that, I can watch someone else first, or if I have a sick staff member, I can still hold them accountable to view the presentation. And a Q&A section. So it's just another piece that we are doing to provide information for all staff as we move forward. And that is what we have for you tonight. If you have any questions, we would be happy to take them.
So when we are out hiring, interviewing and hiring new teachers, particularly ones who are new to the system, do you find that they're somewhat conversant in this particular method of evaluation? Or is it, wow, we haven't seen anything like this before in college, or what do you find?
That's a very good question. I would say it depends. However, I've been at a couple sites this year as the principals have done the introductory video, and some of our new teachers have said, oh yeah, we've looked at this, I know the Marzano model, and they've had some experiences with it. I think it would depend on the university, but they are moving in that direction. Dr. Schatz was at a meeting this morning with the Bush Foundation, and the purpose of that group is to really work with us on helping prepare our future teachers at the university level. And we both serve on a Dean's Advisory Council, and they ask us those questions and want to align with what we're doing. So I think we're moving in that direction. Not all.
Oh, Jim?
I'm just curious, because of the titling, said principals and teachers. So is this same roadmap for principals, or I'm guessing we maybe have a different version?
That's a great question.
And I would think the principal might be critical, since they're eventually going to have to implement this and evaluate the teacher.
Absolutely. There is a leadership model. It looks very similar. There are 5 domains instead of 4. The 5th domain is culture. And this year, the principals were required to work on the 5th domain of culture, as well as picking another 1 or 2. And Dr. Gross and I implemented that in February. It was a faster timeline by the state. So our principals will talk about the rigor of that this year. And we've also worked on some goal setting within a growth plan through the tool for our principals.
David?
I have a question. In your discussions with principals, has there ever been any discussion about how many periods of observation you think should be required before you formulate an evaluation?
Yes. I was not at the meeting because we were interviewing this week, so neither Cheryl or I were there, but we have had a lot of conversations about, depending on the teacher, in the model, they call them Category 1 or Category 2 teachers, and Category 1 being our teachers that are in the induction phase, so the first 3 years. And we've talked about what's reasonable and what also is fair. So prior to December, how many categories, we call them informals, formals, or walkthroughs. So we've defined those for staff as well, and that will be on the site shortly. So how many of each of those types of observations equate a formal evaluation for December, and how many more would equate the March? And for the Category 2 teachers, our teachers who are off the induction phase, for their March, how many times would be a minimum before I could hit submit on your evaluation? I don't know them off the top of my head because we just decided this week, but we have looked at even timing. How many minutes would be constituting a walkthrough, about how many minutes would be an informal, and how many minutes would be a formal. And additionally, if with a formal, would there need to be some type of pre-conversation with the principal as following up by a post? And the language, again, will catch us because right now we talk about informal and formal, completely different in our district. Informal, right now we're saying, is when it's not your 3-year eval, and formal is your formal year. Again, it's more education on the language of the system.
Just to follow up, I had another, I think something else that should be considered is if, say at the middle school level where you've got a teacher that's teaching 4 sections of the same class, there is such a huge difference between those classes. You take period 1 and compare it to period 7, and you wouldn't think you were in the same environment at all. And I think it's important that principals spend time with teachers during their entire teaching day to just see some in middle school. It was most apparent with the separation due to music and non-music students, and the degree of motivation that was necessary with some classes was not even considered in other classes. And I think that you might walk into a teacher's best class and think, wow, this person's right on, and see them at another time of day and think, you know, where'd the wheels fall off this bus?
A very unique aspect of this tool is there's a difference when the principal is ready to hit the submit button. They can either share it or collaborate with the teacher. And we're really going to encourage collaboration. So if I was in your classroom and watched a lesson and provide feedback and I collaborate, I send it to you. You can upload information. You can say, oh, well, third period, you should come fifth period tomorrow. And there's this conversation before it's finalized. It allows the teacher, some of them are looking for evidences of standards or rubrics, any of those things. I may not see them in a walkthrough, but you may say, as soon as you left, I shared it with the kids, or before you came in, and they can upload some of those documents and invite them back in, because you're right, different students, different dynamics, different days.
Linda?
A couple quick questions, and you partially answered. I was curious how this information is shared with the teacher and how it's kind of a constant learning tool for them. And also, how do the visits, walkthroughs, the whatever, of the principals, if that's split between the 2 or 3 of you, or how that works? Who evaluates the principals and how that's done?
Yes, right now I work with all the elementary principals, and Dr. Gross works with the middle level and the high schools. And the question about the eye observation tool, very nice part about it is that the teacher has to initiate on, and once that occurs, it starts the relationship that is electronic back and forth. I'm gonna add to that, Bob.
And then in addition to that, how we are sharing this information, Rachel had a slide earlier that had the feedback individual there. There is also a website that she talked about, and that's where we are putting all of this information. The committee has designed PowerPoints and presentations to be shared with each of our staff across the system, in which the principals then will be asked to do that. It's there that a few brave principals have stepped forward and said, we will do it first, we will be videotaped, and then another principal could watch that videotape before they go in and work and share with their own staff. We're also then doing this through our own principal meetings, in which we are sharing the information ahead of time. We are also going through the process of inter-rater reliability, in which we will show a video vignette of a teacher in a classroom, not a Fargo teacher, but someone else. And then we will work collaboratively to score on those rubrics so that we all look at the information and provide similar information and feedback to staff across the system. So there are multiple ways that we're sharing that information.
John?
Madam President and Dr. Agri, Dr. Gross, I'm just curious, who was Robert Marzano and/or the Learning Sciences International? Are these consultants for us, or what's the genesis of this program and the application of it within the district?
Bob Marzano is a national expert in education, researcher. We've been reading texts from Dr. Marzano for the last 12, 13 years, I think. He happened to turn his text into this model with some feedback from people saying this would be great for teacher evaluation if we're really looking at growth. We don't necessarily have a relationship with Dr. Marzano. It's his model, which actually is free, which tells you something about him. Learning Sciences International actually worked directly with Dr. Marzano to create the eye observation, which is the software tool that we're using when we're going in and actually administering evaluations. And then they also are the ones providing the professional development for principals and teachers.
Okay. Jeff has some things to say.
Back in the early 90s when standards-based education came about and all of a sudden schools were going to be using standards, Dr. Marzano actually came to Grand Forks and all of us were trained by him in a professional development series, and I was administrators at the time. So I got to know him back then, but he's one of the best in the business and is considered to be the best practice. And the Danielson, Marzano, these are all researchers that have come up with these models. So. And it's what the state recommended that schools, districts had a choice from. So through all the work they've done, we just feel the Marzano model is going to serve us the best. And so that's more background for you on that. So, and then also, two things. I think the best thing that's going to come out of this is common language. I think that what Rachel hit on that, and the common language that ties back to instruction, which ties back to strategic planning in a standards-based education and the pedagogy and all the things that we're doing to try to bring everything into one silo. The one thing I keep talking about is the reason for the strategic plan is to bring all these pieces and parts together. And so you're going to see that when you see the first draft of the strategic plan, that all these pieces and parts come together into one systematic way of running the district from top to bottom. And so that's what I'm really excited about. As I listen to them talk about this particular piece, this is just one piece of the big pie. Okay? So just wanted to make that comment. I'm happy that we're at this point because the timing of this is perfect with what we're doing with strategic planning. So we're moving forward with the best practice in place.
Good. Thank you. That was very thorough, and I learned a lot, that's for sure. Enrollment projections, Dr. Gross.
Thank you very much. What we'd like to do this evening is share with you secondary enrollment projections, and then we will share with you elementary projections at a future meeting. Up on the screen is some data that we look at to help us make a determination of where we were at last year at this time compared to where we are at this year. So on the screen, a tremendous amount of information, but as I look at the first three columns, what you'll see is each of our three middle schools for grade 6, and then the number of students who a year ago we had in our system that we had registered for courses. And then working all the way down from 7th, 8th, all the way into our 3 high schools. And then we have totaled, for example, last year we had 812 students in grade 6. Then if we compare that to the similar data that we pulled for about 2 days ago on students for next school year who will be 6th graders, and we pull then the number who have schedules, who have registered right now, we also then total the number of 6th graders, and then to provide for you a projection on where we're at, to its far right is the increase or decrease by grade level. So as we go through grades 6 through 12, you can see there are a few grade levels that are slightly smaller. Many are larger as we go through. Grade 11, you'll notice, is a little bit larger decrease, but that's just a larger class moving to the next grade level. But if you look at the very bottom of this data, what we are predicting for next year, grades 6 through 12, is approximately 50 additional students. That's what we're using for our master schedule. That's what we're using to help us determine staffing needs, and that's what we're using to develop our schedule for our students. So as we compare this point in time last year to this year, that's where we're at. These numbers obviously will change. It's a preliminary look at where we're at as we talk about students who will move into our district or out of our district between now and the beginning of the school year. But just to give you a sense of where we're at, secondary education, and we'll provide similar information about elementary at a future meeting.
John?
Madam President, Dr. Gross, I'm just curious how these numbers reflect or mirror our demographic studies that were presented to us by RSP, if you're seeing any variances or not.
You know, as I look at the numbers, much of the information that was shared with us is that we would look at a growth of about 100 to 150 students. I think it's evident here that we're seeing 50 of that at the secondary level. And then as we present the elementary information to you, we'll see that as well.
Yes, and I think it's tracking kind of what we're expecting. So, and you have to remember, this is April. Our mobility rate this year is just up and down and all over the place and has been very high, so for whatever reason. And so these are very preliminary, and a lot can change between now and the first day of school. The other reason is the elementary too. It's hard to give you any data right now because the kindergarten registrations are inconsistent, so it wouldn't be good data to bring to you right now.
If I might continue, Madam President, Dr. Schatz, Dr. Gross, the efforts and programs or practices you're undertaking to lower our dropout rates and to put more focus on keeping students in, I'm guessing that's also starting to surface in these numbers in part of our growth, as fewer students may be lost or fading out?
We plan to have a report to you at the end of the year about where we ended up with that this year. And at that time, we can kind of make some of those determinations. So it might be that might be apples and oranges at this point. So when we get the final numbers of the year, we'll be able to kind of clarify that more. Yeah.
So you might have to come back and visit us. Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Gross? And oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Brock, legislative update. You're running out of things to do, aren't you?
Right, Madam President, members of the board, it's winding down, so that'll be one thing that we check off our list. I just looked at an update before I came down, and in fact, the House and Senate last evening did act on Senate Bill 2031, and it is now, will be moved to the governor for signature. At this point, I do not have all of the particulars of what the conference committee had done there. As I shared with you in communication between the last board meeting and now, it looked like they were settling in that 3% range of increase, and we need to look at all the particulars of weighting factors, et cetera. And my plan is to go through the bill as soon as it's signed and get the particulars on paper and present that Friday at planning as we start thinking about budgeting and budget assumptions and how we move forward. So I hope by Friday morning we have as much knowledge on our foundation aid payment as will be available for the next 2 years.
Okay, I guess we can make the rounds here. Did you have anything else, Dr. Gross or Agri? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to give you an update tied to our human resources addendum. We spent time this week with some principals, directors, teachers, and parents in pursuing the next principal at Bennett Elementary with Tricia Erickson's retirement. And you'll see that we have brought to you Sarah Schaefer. She is currently in the Washington, D.C. area, but is a Valley City native, and we would like her to come work with us as our next principal at Bennett Elementary School, and think she would be a great fit. Additionally, we have also, in that process, named the new principal for our K-5 school that will be at the Eagles Elementary site, and we have offered that to Tanya Lingle, who is currently at McKinley Elementary School. And of course, that creates a chain reaction. So the plan moving forward is Tanya will stay at McKinley next school year and continue the great work that she's started this year. Cheryl Jansen, who is currently an assistant at our Lewis and Clark Elementary School, will make a transition over winter break next year and go over and work as the assistant alongside Tanya to really work with the continuation of what's been done with Tanya and make that a smooth transition for the staff and the students. And then in 2016, Cheryl will become the head principal at McKinley.
Anything else, Bob?
Nothing else at this time.
Brock, you done?
I will give you, Madam President, members of the board, one quick update, not quite to that completion, but something you're interested in because you have close working relationships with both positions. We are in the process of interviewing for the Human Resources Director position upon Cheryl's announcement of her retirement, and so we're working through that process this week. Next week, we will also be conducting interviews for my executive assistant that also works very closely with several board committees. We do plan to set up interviews for next Monday and Tuesday, so by the next board meeting, we likely will have an update for you on those positions that you work closely with as well.
Busy, busy. Anne Marie?
Nothing to report, thank you.
Okay. And I just want to say, I hope I look as good as you, Cheryl, when I retire. Jeff?
I wanted to bring this attention to the board because I think it's a pretty big deal. Jerry Sheldon passed away. I don't know how many of you knew Jerry, but Jerry was a longtime employee of the Fargo Public Schools. Started in 1982, retired in 1991, but remained a very big champion for our school district, involved in all sorts of things in our community. Jerry, I was in high school when Jerry was the assistant principal at North. Paul, you may remember, because Paul was a staff member back then. And over the years has just been a real champion for education, a real cheerleader in supporting all of us in the ranks too, you know, following you through your career. I can remember receiving notes in the mail from Jerry up in Grand Forks when I was principal up there, and then coming back to town to do the jobs that I've done here, and has just been so supportive. So he was a good friend, and he passed away, and visitation is this Friday, 5 to 7. It's going to be over at Hanson Runsvold, and then his funeral is Saturday. It's going to be at 10:30 at Faith United Methodist, and so I just thought that we should honor Jerry tonight because he was a big champion of our district, and it's sad to see him pass away. So, going forward, this week, the strategic plan, we are in the process of creating the draft, and we're almost finished. Anne Marie and I have been working hard on that, trying to get that cleaned up. We're going to send that out probably tomorrow to the committee, and it's a rough draft. It'll still need a cover letter and other things, but it'll have kind of embody the spirit of what the strategic plan will ultimately look like. We're also going to send it out to you just like we have with all those committee meeting materials, and I would ask that you find some time to take a look at it and start looking at it, because there's on May 12th, what I'm hoping to do is to bring it to you as a draft, and then for you to be able to provide feedback and ask questions, and for me to do a presentation on it and those types of things. So you'll probably see that on the May 12th agenda. My hope is that we can come to some kind of agreement as a district on a new strategic plan, so that as we get into June, we can use that to guide our operational plan that we will create. And then also it'll be really critical for our principals to be able to have that plan to use as they plan for next year, the activities in their building, the requirements for culture plan, some of the things that we're going to be asking them to do. So it'll really be important for us to have that in place. So it's been a year-long process. It's been a good process. We meet one more time this coming Monday, over at Agassiz with the committee. And again, that's been about a 50-number group of people. I'm going to get their feedback and then bring it back to you on May 12th for your consideration as a draft and for your feedback discussion. So we may want to plan a little bit of time for that at that board meeting. But I'm happy to have it at this point, and I think that we'll be ready to do that. So that's my report tonight.
Very good. Thank you for your reports, everybody. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion. Jim?
I move adoption of the consent agenda as provided with the HR addendum that was added.
Second. Second.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the HR addendum, please vote by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? No. And on to our business section. We have the FM Flood Risk Management District Number 1 Special Assessment Memo, and it looks like Mr. Johnson will lead us through that.
Yes, thank you, Robin. As you all probably recall from our last board meeting, we, as a property owner, have a ballot to cast, and I think the ballots are due on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, regarding whether or not we are in favor of the FM diversion project being backstopped through the Joint Waters Resource District having a special assessment levy that they could lay against property in the affected area. We control 6,249,458 votes. You basically get one vote for each dollar you could end up being specially assessed. And again, I think, as everybody probably recalls, the plan that they're working towards will probably not see a special assessment, and certainly not the full amount of the special assessment, because they're hoping to use sales tax revenues that have already been dedicated to service this debt. This is to basically be able to guarantee if the sales taxes are not enough, the government has another way to pay for the bond indebtedness that it's going to be taking on. At the bottom, we worked out a chart, and we kind of walked you through it last time. I'll just touch base on it again. We have the authority as a governing body to levy for special assessments. We have in the past. Currently, we don't have one because we had paid them all off. We may have to have some kind of a levy for special assessments in the near term as we see the specials come in from the infrastructure over at Davies, or excuse me, at Ed Clapp's site. But if this was to pass, that they need to use the special assessment to pay off the indebtedness on the diversion project for the local share, which is what this is all tied to, we then could theoretically take that money out of our general fund if we wanted to, or we could levy our special assessment levy. And what we did is we just assumed the worst case, the entire 6.2 million, and assumed an interest rate of 2.5%. That's approximately what would be happening if this special assessment came to us today. That interest rate could change when this happens, but we had to use something. And we looked at if we paid it back over 5 years, over 10 years, over 15 years, what would the net effect be on how many mills would we have to add to our property taxpayers to be able to satisfy this debt? If we spread it out over 15 years, it would effectively be 1.66 mills that we'd add to the total levy that would be going out to the property holders of Fargo Public School District. If we did it under 5 years, it would be 4.43 mills. And then we actually, on the bottom part of this chart, showed the dollars and cents of what that means. On a $100,000 home, if we did it on a 15-year basis, we'd basically be raising their property tax bill by $7.48. If we did it on a 5-year basis, we'd be raising it by about $20. And you see corresponding numbers for a home of $250,000. So I guess with that, before I throw it open to any questions, I'll at least put forward a motion so we can get this thing in front of us. I'm going to move that I'm not sure how we move to vote, that we cast a ballot in favor of allowing this special assessment levy authority to the Joint Water Resource District.
Okay, motion and second. Before I open up the floor to questions, I do want to let you know that Rocky Snyder is in the audience. He'd be happy to serve as backup questions if we can't answer those. One clarifying question, though. The process itself, Jim, and I think I know the answer, it's following Century Code on how to ask for and divvy out how these special assessments would be assigned. So,
That is my understanding.
okay.
I'll be truthful, I'm not an expert on the Century Code, but that is what I've been told as well.
Okay, okay. John?
Madam President, I was really looking forward to making the motion, but I'm happy to chime in on this. It is actually according to statute, and some folks are wondering and having some sense of how un-American this seems, but it's as American as it gets if you're following your Century Code, and it is according to statute. I'll remind us. I'm glad we approached this where we had a 2-week notice to the public, and gave everybody the opportunity to be present tonight. Some folks cautioned us that we might have a room full of people who have views about the diversion, and that's not the case, in fact. So I'm commending the board for giving us the notice to the public, so that when we cast our votes tonight, we've done that due diligence, and we've let the people know this is coming. We're here to listen to you, and we're interested in your feedback. A couple minor notations. Of our $6.2 million, over $1 million of it is just the Davies edition, and it's a relatively small price to pay for a protection insurance of not just Davies, but contributing to ensure protection of that part of town, which is one of the higher risk neighborhoods in Fargo. The last several weeks, I've actually talked to maybe hundreds of people, and there's no doubt at all the people, even though they might have had a lot of questions about the process and thoughts about the process, and wanted to question how it all came about and whether we're educated enough and so on, and maybe we could have done a better job at that. There's absolutely no question at all. The people I've been talking to support flood protection unequivocally and support the diversion seriously. And I've had every demographic possible. And it's the most prominent question I've been asked is about this assessment and about the diversion. But I remember one guy coming out and telling me, I'm tired of schlepping sandbags, you know, and pointing at the dikes. I talked to a woman last night who told me, anybody who doesn't know what we went through at our hospital when we had an emergency evacuation, and we had critical ill patients, we had heart patients, we had people in the middle of procedures, we had babies that their families didn't know where they were going. She says, don't let any public official ever let this happen to our community ever again. You know, so there was some compelling information from people, but there's no doubt the people want flood protection, and there's no doubt this is foresightful. And I'm really pleased, and as a member of the district, to join in the support of that effort, even if it's only a small relative amount compared to like the cities or the counties or the other government subdivisions. I'm just really pleased to cast a yes vote tonight.
Thank you, John. Paul?
John, you said some interesting things, and I'm not against the flood diversion program or any types of flood mitigation, but I don't know that it would be fair to characterize the entire population of the world here in this part of the country as in favor of the particular flood diversion program. I think probably most everybody's in favor of preventing floods, but there are different ways of doing it. And when someone says, don't ever let this happen to our hospital again, there are lots of methods for assuring that it won't happen to the hospital again. There's a lot of controversy out there right now with regard to the benefits of the flood diversion program and mitigating the situation in the way it's going to be mitigated. And again, I'm not against it. I'm only saying that people who live upstream and downstream of Fargo probably have some different views with regard to the diversion project. And fortunately or unfortunately, we don't necessarily have to consider those as we vote our conscience on this. But there are lots of questions out there, and there's a very active group of people who see some problems with this. And no one likes to schlep sandbags, but a lot of people don't like to lose their rich farmland to a new lake either. And so, you know, there are definitely two sides to the issue that I think are interesting. I'd like to ask Jim, and you may have explained this, Jim, and if I missed it, number one, and I'll kind of respond as we go along, the diversion process to complete it, if the everything passes and if the state funds it the way it's supposed to, and then the federal government actually kicks in the money they say they're going to kick in, and Minnesota doesn't really want to kick much in, but if it all happens, how many years will it be from beginning till end? This is the year 2015. Will it be about 2025 or 30 before it's done?
Well, I'm not certain anybody would give you a hard date. I think the last update we had was they're hoping to actually start approximately 2 years from now doing some serious earth moving with a timeline of maybe having it done within 5 to 7 years. But there are lots of moving parts, as you clearly identified: federal funding, state funding. This particular thing we're talking about is for the indebtedness that's going to be taken on by local, which is really going to be the first dollars getting expended in this process, backed with the sales tax. So I think your timeline isn't so far off, maybe 2025, but I think there's some engineering things that are still works in progress in this thing too.
So the second half of the question, and this is just kind of for our understanding as we vote on this, because we have a lot more votes than the typical homeowner in town. And I know I sat for a long time before I sent in my ballot, and then when I compared to the 6 million votes we're casting here, it's somewhat dwarfed. But, so we could be looking at a 7 to 10 to 15-year timeline to get this done. Probably be correct to say that in those 7 to 10 to 15 years, we're going to continue to do some somewhat temporary, somewhat permanent flood control. Not the least of which involves the Fargo School District and the buyout of our warehouse and the flood wall for downtown and things like that, right?
Oh, absolutely. The city has got a ton of work it's doing with diking out south, over here on Second Street. That's part of the, I guess, getting us to one level of protection. The diversion is obviously to take us to the next level. I think the burning issue at the city level right now is what can we do, how fast can we do it to keep basically every property south of Interstate 94 out of the situation of having to buy mandatory flood insurance. At least that's the impression I've been getting. And I'll be, I guess, a little bit honest here. Since I don't live south of Interstate 94, I haven't really paid much attention to what that cost function might be, but I've heard some pretty startling numbers as to what it could cost not only homeowners, but also our commercial property owners out south. So I think they're doing efforts right now interior to the city and on the perimeters of the current developed part of the community to try and mitigate that flood map as much as possible.
And just a final follow-up, the total dollar cost of the diversion project roughly about? Maybe Rocky knows.
You got me there, and whatever number they give you, I'd put a big asterisk by it because it really will depend on when we start turning shovels. As we just have been learning, as we go to bid with things, you know, not just the school district, but others in the community, like our city hall, the price of construction continues to go up. And so the sooner they start this project, the sooner it'll be able to be completed and we'll actually have a physical number that we can look at.
But the number around 2 billion, is that what we may have heard?
Yeah.
2 billion. And the reason that I point that out is because I do deal with numbers every day, and we have to realize that if we invest 2 billion in that, and if you were to simply earn 5% on that money somewhere, you're talking about perhaps $100 million a year that could be spent in other forms, in alternate forms of flood protection. And you know what? I'm not campaigning for those other forms. I'm only saying a lot of issues that seem clear-cut, black and white, slam dunk, are not always nearly that way.
John?
Paul, Madam President, members of the board, the number that they're using mostly is 1.8 billion. There is some sentiment out there, or sense out there, that by expediting the project and shaving off years of time of implementation, that they'll, some say, save as much as 300 million. There's also a notion that with this backdrop plan, there will be $100 million savings in interest costs by having better rates. But I want to thank you for raising the notion, the concerns of the different people impacted, and our realities with them. You know, it is the truth, and we do have issues with Wilkin and Richland counties and the diversion, and we have issues with the Minnesota DNR, and the reality is we also have issues getting federal funding. And I've called the congressional delegations myself and learned that on my own. What I've also learned, however, though, is we need to all get on the same page, and we all need to find a place where we can all land. And if we don't all land on the same page with a unified voice, the likelihood of having Minnesota support or gaining back the trust of upstream impacted folks is diminished a lot. And then our federal funding is even significantly further at risk. So I thank you for bringing that up. That is absolutely the truth, that we have some resolve to seek with parties other than just Fargo. And that's necessary perhaps to get the federal funding and the North Dakota legislative funds that are contingent on federal funding. So you're hitting the nail on the head by us not dancing around that reality, that we have people to get to the table. But meantime, I'm just thinking that, you know, this, as a school district, and our opportunity to do our part in being a constructive partner at this phase is necessary.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Are you ready, Anne Marie?
Yes. Benson.
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes.
Goldenberg.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Knutson. Myers.
No, my microphone's not working.
Too many other microphones are on. Thank you. Paulson.
No.
Strand.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes, motion carries. Transportation plan for 2015-16 due to boundary changes. Who wants to lead us through that? You're pointing at each other.
Madam President, members of the board, my pointing was more a question. I got the answer, I think. We bring to you at your request, as we talked about the pending boundary changes for secondary, there was a request for us to review what we would do with any of the families who would choose to early petition in that transitional time. As you recall, in our, philosophically, in our transportation, we have not provided transportation to those who petition. We have taken the position that we will transport students from their designated attendance area to their designated school building. But if they choose to petition to another building for whatever reasons, that transportation would be on their own. As we've looked at these boundary changes that'll be coming, we do understand that as students transition to a new location, that there may be benefit in them transitioning early. And one of the things that we needed to have a sense of was how many people were we really talking about in each of these areas. The preliminary numbers would tell us that it looks like we would have 12 early petitions that would be going from what would typically be the Carl Ben Eielson neighborhood to the Carl Ben Eielson building to the Ben Franklin building instead, and 2 petitions that would have otherwise been going to Discovery that would go to Carl Ben Eielson. Taking a look at what those numbers mean to our existing routes, we believe that, first of all, administration does believe it's important that we do provide that early transportation for those early petitioners, but that we would have that be an exception to our practice purely for this transition tied to the secondary boundaries. And we would be able to provide that transportation for those students who have decided to early petition. All indications would have us using the existing routes, and when those routes drop at their existing building, they would then continue on from there. Students would stay on their existing bus and go to their new location. Those particulars are maybe more in the weeds than you want to be at this particular moment, but we certainly feel there is a way to provide this transportation, and it would be our recommendation that you approve our recommendation to, in fact, provide transportation for early petitioners for this purpose.
Okay. Rebecca?
Thank you for putting that together. I'd like to move approval of the administration's recommendation to provide transportation for early petition students for the 2015-2016 school year in conjunction with the new secondary boundary changes as indicated in the Fargo Board of Education memo number 120 dated April 28th, 2015.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All right. Go ahead, Anne Marie.
Boyd.
Yes.
Goldenberg.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Paulson.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes, motion carries. Sure, Jeff, go ahead. Yes.
I just forgot to mention this, and I just wanted to make this comment. We didn't have students here tonight to do any kind of presentations, but we do have a student in the back. And he's from Ben Franklin, and he's working on his Eagle Scout, and part of his process is to come watch a public board in their meeting. So I went back and introduced myself, and so I just wanted to say, good job, and we're happy to have you here. So thank you.
Welcome. Is the wishes of the board to take a break before we move on? Okay. We will reconvene at 5:45, or 6:45. Okay, let's get started. Looks like Dinah's going to lead us off on as our communications chair for the elementary school visit discussion.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Thank you, everybody, for submitting your reflections of your experiences. And thank you, I wanted to say to Rachel also for suggesting that we work through the strategists. I think having read through all of everybody's comments, I think it was pretty much a positive experience for everybody. And since we've all read, I hope, each other's detailed reports, I thought what might be helpful is go around, if you have something in addition to what you've written or a more general comment about the experience, or also how you feel about doing this another year, whether you recommend that we continue this. I know it's only the first year that we did an elementary engagement, or if you have suggestions about how we might do it differently. I think those comments would be helpful. So Jim, if you want to start. And don't feel that you have to make comments if there's nothing that you want to add to what's already on your document.
Thanks. No.
I guess he didn't know.
Well, I think anytime we get out and get ourselves involved in the instructional buildings is a good thing. But I do have one concern, and I kind of embedded it in my comments, because I think we do change the dynamics in certain settings. I know several of us, I think, ended up in very, very small interfaces between a strategist and one student, or maybe 2 or 3 students. Clearly, my presence there changed the dynamics for that day's lesson. It really did. The students looking at me as opposed to focusing, and quite frankly, they don't get much time with these students either. It's pretty impactful minutes. So I think we just always got to ask ourselves, you know, we want to be engaged. I think that's great. But if there's ways we can do it that do not negatively impact what is supposed to be going on in the instruction that day, those would be the best ones in my mind. But I enjoyed the experience a lot.
Thank you. John?
Madam President, Dinah, I really personally benefited immensely from this interaction with our strategist and in particular with the principal at Madison and the guided tour through the facility and the processes and the classes and the way that they work daily. I just found that it went to a level that I wasn't accustomed to with this interaction. And I'll just anecdotally share a story. Some of you have heard me allude to this, but just a simple not a simple, but a conversation we had about mandatory reporting and relations with county social services or state social services is having a ripple effect that's going to contribute significantly, I believe, to even us partnering even more with the county and with other entities and communicating more and in ways that I believe there's some real benefits that are going to be unfolding in time, and it was just simply out of conversations, you know, and it happens that we happen to have a former school board member on the county board, county commission, so yeah, we have a level of interaction accessible to us, and I'm really pretty positive about that type of a result for kids especially, and us understanding each other's circumstances with regard to their provision of services and our provision of services, and how we overlap and how we can help each other even more in what we do.
Thank you.
All right, well, I thought it was an exceptional day. And I loved the fact that I was at Kennedy because my most experience that I have is at a smaller elementary school, at Clara Barton Hawthorne. So that paired smaller school comparison to Kennedy, and just getting a better sense as to how that school functions, which seems like it functions really well. So basically my written comments were based on kind of the comparisons of my two different kinds of experiences. So it provided a lot of education, I would say, for me. I wanted to also say that the music class that I attended, and I hope I'm saying it, Mrs. Schlotterback, her class was so amazing. But she is listed on our HR agenda as not being with us. She's resigning. And so after that was at the end of my day at Kennedy. It was like the best way to wrap up my visit, to see these, there were 3 or 4 classes that were coming into her music room, one after another, of kindergartners and first graders, and these kids were just jazzed and so excited to be in there, and she was too. And then I was talking to the principal afterwards, and he said, yes, and unfortunately we'll be losing her, and so I'm sure we're going to find someone that will, be able to take her spot, but she'll definitely be missed, I'm sure. So I also thought it was interesting to be able to spend time with the ELL kids, and it's Mrs. Linda Miller that I spent time with. I had also, earlier when we did our high school engagement, I was at Davies, and so was able to see how some of that education goes with the high school students and the ELL refugee group, and compare that to what goes on at Kennedy, and see students that were coming in at what we have more, say, at the junior high level, or excuse me, at, say, a junior level in high school, and what they're learning, what they need to learn based on how long they've been in our country and in Fargo, and take that and compare that to what maybe a 5th grader is at. And, lots of them are at the same level, so it was just kind of interesting to experience that. And I'd be happy to do it more. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you.
David?
I was at Longfellow, and it took us about 2 weeks to find a time when Susan was not too busy to meet. And that's truly how busy she seemed to be. I had no real understanding of what strategists did. So Susan and I spent most of the time just discussing her role and how she worked to mentor teachers, and the relationship that she developed with teachers, that it seemed to be a really good thing, because she was able to critique them without them feeling that they were being evaluated. And it seemed to be, it seems to be a beneficial program. She didn't appear to have enough time to adequately, cover even her small staff. I think I mentioned in there that there are only 18 teachers at Longfellow. She was currently working with 7 of them. And she seemed a bit frustrated with the fact that there wasn't enough time to adequately spend. She is working with some students besides the teachers. But I really enjoyed the time I spent with Susan.
I got to go to Horace Mann, and I too, like probably everyone on the entire board, would probably say it was a great personal experience for me, a chance to visit with a neat principal and see him in action. If I had to characterize it in 1 or 2 words, what the experience was like, I would say it was intense and passionate. I think you see the intensity with which the staff, all of the staff, not just the teachers, but certainly the teachers as well as the administrators and the office staff, the intensity with which they have to work all day long. It isn't a sit around and observe type of thing. And the passion that I saw for positive change in the students is just so evident. In fact, I'm going to pass around a photograph. Watch out. You could put fingerprints on it, I guess, if you want, because I have more. But I managed to take some pictures while I was over there, because I thought, I want to do something with this that's going to be special. So I'm going to give the principal at Horace Mann a nice framed copy of this. I might do a little adjusting in it, since they do strange things when they print it, I discover, as far as cropping. But the intensity, the passion, I thought was great. But then I come back to a topic that I've felt for years when we do projects like this. And so I'm going to turn it maybe around to Dinah, and whether she does it now or later, it would be, so we go out and we go through these schools and we observe these things, and I think it's important to each of us because we see what's going on in the elementary schools. But I'm wondering, what will this activity change going forward? We all spend 4 hours, 5 hours in an elementary school or in a high school. We see things and we say, oh, I marveled at how this happened. So what changes as a result of this? Is there any way we can get this message out to the public? I mean, as I was going through spending the day there, I kept thinking, boy, I wish a reporter from one of the news media were shadowing me watching this go on, because the things you see, these are not just employees. You know, I have employees and I see what they do every day, and there isn't this kind of passion or intensity that you see. When the principal was going through the school, greeting the kids by name, and they would come up and hug his leg, and you know, it's just incredible. What happens to them by the time they get to high school? I don't know. They're not hugging his leg, I can tell you that. But I wish that the public could see this, because for all the complaints and the problems and the clubs that need to be started and the, gee, we need this and we need that, if only they could see what goes on in these schools every day. So my question is, it was nice for us to go through and observe all this. How is this going to change anything? What's going to happen differently? So there it is. That's my report. I'm sticking to it.
Well, I was actually thinking along those same lines. Had a wonderful experience, and clearly I'm not as scary as Jim is, because I was in a very tiny room, and this student was just right like this doing the letters, so there's that. We started this idea several years ago when we were trying to come up with a different strategy for receiving student input. I think before my time, and Paul, I think this was a favorite activity of yours, that we hosted a pizza party at the Fargo Dome for senior high kids, and for the purpose of hearing what they had to say and informing our understanding. And then that got changed to wanting to get more of a cross-section, and one year we did student councils, one year we did kind of a cross-section in the schools, and now it has evolved into this visitation, not only at the secondary level, but at the elementary level. And it occurs to me, after doing this for however many years, that it's a really, really worthwhile thing for us to do, but maybe not for the reason we designed it for. I think it's important, and when you ask what changes, I think what changes is the level of our understanding of what happens in a school building as board members. And I think it's important that we go and have one or two of those intense experiences every year so that we don't lose sight of it. We see, when we hear reports here at board meetings, it's hard to visualize what that really means until you've seen it. And so I think it's important for our edification and professional development and understanding. So, and I was also thinking of the original philosophy of students having an avenue for communicating with board members. I don't even know if that's appropriate anymore. I mean, we don't encourage teachers to come directly to board members to give us their feedback. There's a process for that through their buildings. Students have enough to do with looking ahead at what they need to do and how they interact with their teachers and their principals and everything. I think our role is governance, but I think we do our job best when we have a vivid understanding of what's actually going on in the schools. But beyond that, I think the purpose is to better us.
Go ahead, Robin.
I won't share all my thoughts because a lot of them are already shared. I agree with what Linda said as well. The one thing that hasn't been said is school is a lot different than I went many years ago. There used to be one teacher assigned to 30 kids, and now there are several people working to individualize that education. And so that allows us to really target every student, what they need at every level, whether they're gifted or whether they're struggling. And so it was amazing to me to see how much collaboration is really needed in order to to challenge these students and help them grow, and how important it is. And speaking back to the purpose of why we do these, this helps me buy into the importance of continuing to support these positions, because I know that they're impactful. I mean, what a good advertisement for protecting that in the budget. That's kind of how I see it. Okay, this is important. I thought we had maybe too many paras and extra teachers running around before, but I get this now. So that's one of the reasons I enjoy these too. So thank you for organizing them.
Well, thank you, everyone, and actually, Linda took most of my words out of my mouth. I've always said that one of the most important things as board members that we need to do is be in the schools, because if we don't see and know what's going on in our schools, then how can we make educated decisions about money and where it's being spent and programs and whether we support them? And every single one of you said in one way or another that exactly that. You saw something that you didn't either understand or have full appreciation for before, and it is professional development for us. And I think that in my tenure as communications director or chair or whatever, that this is so valuable, because to some degree it forces each of us to have this experience once or twice in the year, that if it were just left to us to do on our own, somehow we don't find the time, or we don't, everybody's busy. But when it's sort of a board requirement to do it, then I think that it's really valuable. So in terms of change, I think what changes is our understanding of what goes on in the schools. I don't think that the goal was to find out what was wrong, so we should change it. I think the goal is to find out what we're doing right or what's going on so we can continue to support it. So the one thing I would say, because Rachel, actually, I would ask you maybe to do this, because some of the concerns were, are we disrupting the interaction with students and so on. I would like for you to get some feedback from the strategists now that they've done this once. I know that I went first to Centennial, and then I did my Claire Barton Hawthorne as well. And he was the guinea pig at Centennial, and he was just so excited to have me there. And I think that I got the impression that, all the other strategists were lining up waiting for their turn to show off what they were doing and what they could do in their own buildings. So I guess from the communications committee perspective, I think it would be helpful for us to know what feedback they might have had from the experience of board members being there, and whether or not they have recommendations for things we could do differently. And then we can have a conversation about what happens next year. Everybody will have a different elementary school next year, and so the experience will be different if you go somewhere else. But at our next communication, I'll just say this now if it's okay, since it ties in, is going to be May 11th, and the main subject of our discussion will be the engagements or these visits for next year and what we recommend for the following year, because I know from experience that if we decide now, then we can put the pieces in place for the schools to know, and it's much smoother transition for next year. So if you could do that, that would be great. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dinah, and thank you to the Communications Committee for spearheading that, and administration for setting it up. All right, who wants to go first for NSBA sharing? We've got Johnson, Myers, and Strand. Jim.
I'll go mostly because I don't really have what I wanted. And I was really happy I didn't have to do this last time because we had our attorney in the room. I actually went to several sessions that really had a legal focus on them. That usually is what I tend to gravitate to. And I uncovered an incredible law firm out of Chicago that focuses its entire effort on public schools, primarily K-12, but also some universities, by the name of Franzek and Radelet. And I was kind of surprised. The first one I went to, these two young attorneys were presenting, and I said, boy, these people are pretty sharp. I think I'm going to write down this name. Through the course of the conference, I got to two other ones that were, again, pretty sharp attorneys, not the same ones, but with the same firm. So clearly this outfit out of Chicago does a lot with education law. They have something called a Title IX toolkit that I was hoping to bring back, give to Jeff to share with his group. And that's the one I'll focus a bit on, one of the sessions I went to. According to them, and I'm sure this is probably the case, whether it was the Rolling Stone article or any number of things that have been happening primarily on higher ed campuses, there is a heightened awareness going on right now in the OCR office on Title IX and sexual violence going on campuses. And they're pretty sure this heightened awareness and enforcement that's coming at the higher ed level is permeating down into the K-12 level too. And, you know, it was kind of interesting. There was a school board member in the audience who used to be a prosecuting attorney, okay? And so he got up and he started, you know, explaining to people, well, no, you need to just back off when the law enforcement and the prosecuting attorney wants the school district to back off. You got to back off and let them do their job. And this gal, who looked like she was only out of law school by about 2 months, clearly pretty sharp, looked right at him and she said, well, you're certainly entitled to your opinion, but rest assured, nobody we represent will operate that way because you have your own responsibility as a school district, and it doesn't matter what law enforcement is asking of you because OCR will be here to enforce the rules for you. So she put him in his spot like that quick. So great law firm. I'm going to track down this Title IX toolkit and get it over to our district people. I think we do a great job on this already, but they're really trying to kind of get ahead of what they think is the new enforcement effort coming out just based upon all the sexual violence going on college campuses. And it's actually already happened to a couple of K-12 districts as well. So maybe something that our team can learn from as well. And the only other thing I would say, I've been to a lot of these conferences, I've been to a lot of convention centers. This has to be the most expensive architectural design in the history of a convention center. Perhaps not the most expensive building, but the most expensive architectural design you could dream. Pretty sure.
Well, thanks for that. Who's next? Paul?
I'm passing around just a tersely worded summary of some of the things that I saw when I was at the convention. And then I have a couple of other things that I'm going to send off by email. First one was, once again, I went to see Jim Spellos, the guy who does Googleicious, and probably the most popular presenter at the convention that I've been to for the last 5 years. I go every year, and you'd think I'd remember it from year to year. He, among other things, does 60 applications to use on a smartphone or a laptop or desktop. Incredibly talented guy who could do some great professional development. I can't remember, did we bring him to Fargo? No, we haven't brought him to Fargo. Well, that's too bad, because if you want to pick out 2 or 3 words like practical, usable, and inspiring, those 3 would fit for him. And I can't imagine he's that expensive. I think he's down in the Twin Cities, if I remember right. I could be wrong at that. But he does the kind of, well, how many of us have seen him before? Most of us have seen him, haven't we? I mean, he does the kind of presentation that you actually get something you take back and go, wow, I could use this. If you sign up at his webpage, which you can do by Googling his name, you'll get a 15-page guide called Your Guide to the Best Apps for Your Smartphone and Tablet, which I was going to print out and give to each of you, except I realized it's like 1/3 of the tree, so I didn't do that. And I thought I'd just try to send it to you if you would like it. But very good stuff. I mean, it's just page after page of stuff you don't realize that you can do that would separate you from what the rest of the world does with their smartphones and tablets and things like that. I would love it if once and for all we brought this guy to Fargo, frankly, every year and had him do PDs with different groups of people, because he must be doing something right. He gets asked back every year to the convention. He never talks in words you don't understand, and his sessions have gone from a room this size to filling the auditorium. So I like the guy. The second one, I know both Rebecca and I saw, Angela Myers. Let's face it, I went because of her last name. Maybe not. She did a seminar called You Matter, and seems like, was she one of the podium presenters or something? Because there's some reason that we went to it. I don't remember what it was. But in any case, if you're at all interested in this, and you may or may not be, if you email to her at Gmail and request to sign up for her materials from NSBA, she sends an ebook called Passion Matters. I also thought, because I go to these and once again, I'm looking for, okay, what could we do that would impact our district? You know, rather than, I went to it, it was really fascinating. No one else is gonna know about it, but I'm pretty fascinated. Angela Myers is coming to North Dakota. Is she coming to Fargo too, or is she just coming to North Dakota, or we don't know? Okay, well, when Rebecca and I contacted her, she said, oh, North Dakota, I was just there and I'm coming back, or something like that, and I didn't quite get it all straight. But she's all about intensity and passion and making students and others feel that they matter. And she must be good at what she does. She just radiates it. And when we're looking for people who might be interesting for professional development, you know, it just seems like she'd be incredible. Very inspirational, very uplifting, very positive. I think one thing she said is that every day she makes sure she mentions by name every kid in her classroom, by name, so that that kid will know someone thought about them. That sounds kind of corny, but, and I'm sure it's tougher in big cities, perhaps, where the kids don't get much attention. But instead of just, hey, you, sit down and be quiet and pay attention, it was, you know, Harold Johnson, what's new in your life today? Anyway, interesting lady, and it's pretty easy to go to her webpage and just sign up for her stuff, and then she'll send you some cool things. And the other thing I did is one of our speakers was a guy named Pogue. I think most of you see him. He was the guy from, wasn't he from Microsoft or someplace, or Yahoo or someplace? I know you're breathing out there, I can hear it. Well, anyway, I got his book if anyone would ever like to read it. It's Essential Tips and Shortcuts That No One Bothers to Tell You for Simplifying the Technology in Your Life. Neat book, and thousands of interesting things in here. And I know you're all going to want to read this tonight. There it is. Thanks.
I just wanted to ask, I also went to that presentation. Rachel, was this the woman we were talking about that had been here? After I came back, we were talking about something and I can't remember. I'm sorry, I've been gone and it hasn't been in my mind. It's not her. Okay, it was somebody else then. Okay.
John?
You folks are lucky. I left my book with notes at home, but I'll summarize what I remember. And first of all, Paul, I always go to Jim Spellows and sincerely appreciate his intellectual acumen with technology. I tend to focus on technology a lot at the conferences, and I would second that he'd be a great speaker to bring to our community at some point in time. Something else that occurs to me, just for the sake of sharing what occurs to me, is I think someday we should figure out how to get one of our musical groups to perform on stage at NSBA. And I think it would be a community effort to give them that experience of going before thousands and thousands of people and having that. They'll never, I mean, it's something that I couldn't even fathom it if we were to find a way to because we have as much talent here as any of those communities we get exposed to every year, and they get such a response, and it's so affirming to them. And I think that we should just somehow have a brainstorm about how could a community send our ambassador musicians to that conference, because I'd really seriously want that to be considered here somehow or other. And as a community effort, I think the community would rise to the occasion and embrace it. I tended this year to focus on technology and the futurism type topics with regard to technology. The last speaker, the last day, and his seminar on futurism as a futurist. And he's from Wisconsin. I think his name was Fisk or something like that. But Fisk, he provoked the audience, had the audience just at the edge of their chair. It was riveting. His view of where the world's going and how that impacts us in the realm of education. And I'll never forget one line he said. He boldly stated that all of you in education out there that are telling all these kids to go to college and go get these degrees, and he said, what you're doing is borderline criminal if what they come out of it with is a massive debt that burdens and changes their life from that point on. and they don't dare take risks. They aren't able to move around. They aren't able to gamble with their choices in life. They're stuck with this burden of debt that won't free them in any way like we used to think education does. And he's trying to challenge us to realize that not everybody's going to college and coming out with a mountain load of debt that you can't get out of is the best way forward for all students. I'll never forget that. Educationally, I found it really interesting, and I know Dr. Schatz also saw some other seminars with regard to like Web 2.0 and the implication of the technologies that are unfolding really, really soon, and how that's going to change the world perhaps in front of us. I'm not the real geek out there that knows this stuff already, but the notion that everything is informationally going to be available to everybody, and the goods and the bads of that are something for us to really keep our eyes on, not only from a protection standpoint of our information, but also championing it as we develop our curriculum and our approaches to learning going forward. A lot of social media conferences, media messaging conferences, how to message. You know, I don't know that I had any big surprises. I find it interesting, though, that the topics change. I remember years ago it was bullying, and then a couple of years later it was DIY, do-it-yourself, and 3D printing, and this year I hardly saw any of those topics. And the one thing in a general sense this year going to the conference was I don't think there was as much of a cloud hanging over national education as I've sometimes sensed in the past. Like that the sky's falling, that we're being undermined everywhere we turn. You know, I felt that there was a lot more optimism this time around than I've seen at many conferences. And the last thing I'll say is I was just pleased our superintendent could be there, because when we come back and try to share what we've seen, it's not as easy. But when you're there, I know you were rolling up your sleeves and digging in deep and drilling down into topics that I just know it gets us a lot of value. And Dr. Schatz, I encourage you to keep going. I know we're tightening our belts on occasion and sometimes telling people not to travel a lot, but I appreciated that you were there as well.
Thank you. The remaining members will be on the next agenda if you want to try to be ready. I purposely assigned some of the veterans first so you kind of get an idea of, not that we do it right, but there you go. All right, regular committee liaison and correspondence report. Should we start with Jim this time?
No.
Okay, but we will.
Okay. Planning will be meeting Friday at 7:30. As you heard from Brock's update on legislative things, we've got a little bit of rolling up our sleeves to do to help his team get ready on the budget process. Obviously, we'll be looking at it as well to make sure we have information available to our negotiations team, who needs to know what we have for freeboard in the budget, theoretically, to increase the structure for our certified staff. We have had a request come to planning that I need to at least share with the board and get some, hopefully, direction from the board. There's a community group that is working to put together what I'll call the We Center. It's really a consortium of the city, some members of our staff, and others involved in the community, trying to really create a center point to hopefully support and address many of the issues dealing in the New American community. And I might call it a welcome center, but it's much more than that, I think. They have requested an opportunity to come to the planning committee and share their thought. I know Jeff is getting involved from the district's perspective, because there may be, at least on a temporary basis, a possibility that they might be looking to see if they have space, we have space they could use. As I looked at this has not come before the board, so the board hasn't directed it to planning. But I think if it's okay with the board, planning's more than willing to put this on our agenda as soon as Jeff has had an opportunity to look at it from a staff perspective, and then we can, hear what their needs are and research what that impact might be back to our students and our budget. But absent some direction, I didn't feel that was really the starting point for this group. Yeah, or even consensus that, yeah, go ahead and work on it would be fine with me.
I'd like to just first ask Jeff where staff is on this. Is this something that staff is ready to bring forward to the board as a request, or is it still in the bubbling up stages?
The staff is just getting involved. So, yeah. So I'll get back to you when I think it's time to bring it back to you. So.
Well, my recommendation would be to let staff kind of field it, because they're the ones that would know the nuts and bolts of size and of the group and the spaces we have and so forth, and then bring it forward when it's time for us to look at it from a governance perspective.
All right, finished, John? Okay. John?
Nothing to report, Madam President.
Okay. Rebecca? Yeah, you probably have some sore feet. Hitting the pavement, huh? Rebecca?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. David?
Nothing right now.
Paul?
Well, like might get reported elsewhere, I was fortunate enough to be with Dinah and Dr. Schatz and Anne Marie and a few others at the Teacher of the Year event today at Carl Ben Eielson. And it was, I'm sure you felt the same way, it was very moving to see the whole adventure. And the best parts, which you didn't get to see, but maybe you'll see at some point. In fact, it'd be kind of fun, actually, to show that video at a meeting, Dr. Schatz, here. That would be a great thing, and to have our Teacher of the Year show up as well. But the comments from the kids, his students, who are not necessarily the student council members at that school, but many of them saying things like, boy, he's really made a difference in my life. And one of them sang a song to him from a great movie. It was awesome to see him sing the song on the video, and they loved it. So, yeah, that's my bit to add.
That's fun.
Well, I was with most of the cabinet and Paul at the Blue STEM announcement last week, and that was fantastic. And a lot of the Moorhead folks were there, city council members, and everybody was happy. We have a long negotiating session coming up Saturday morning. There really wasn't the need for another executive session because we haven't met since the previous board meeting, but we'll be getting information that planning and staff will put together for us regarding what kind of money we'll have as the legislature adjourns. And so our hope is to hammer things out Saturday morning and be done. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's our hope.
As you know, I haven't really been around much in the last month, but I did attend the Teacher of the Year, and there was a presentation also at Centennial, which is my liaison school, on Monday. One of the teachers, Mrs. Young, received a $5,000 grant from CenturyLink, so that was kind of fun, technology grant. And I did manage to get a tour of the Ed Clapp School the day before I left, so that was fun.
All right, you have end of the year invitations in front of you, so try to get to some of those. I'm sure there'll be more. May 15th, City PTA Luncheon, the graduations are listed there. Jennifer moved up to Fargo North with me, and that's pretty cool since she graduated from there. 2 board members still need to submit travel receipts, and 2, we need to answer that doodle poll for the summer retreat date. If you don't answer, we'll just assume you're open, and then we'll decide on that date at the next governance committee. I also toured Ed Clapp. Jennifer is so excited. She was just so excited to share, and it was basically an empty construction-filled building, but she's ready to go. So it was really fun to see her excitement. I also went to the open house that was at the Carlson Library, and it was really well attended. And some of the Clapp family members were there taking pictures in front of their new logo. And I was there on behalf of the Youth Commission, and I have to say, just from the people that walked through that small room, that's got to be one of our most diverse schools. It was utterly amazing to see all the different cultures in there. A little piece on legislative that I didn't want to jump into your report is that early childhood education bill did get passed too, and it was $3 million for the first biennium, $3 million for the second. The school district's part in that is that Jeff will get to assemble a board of community members to oversee early childhood education in Fargo, and that's like on a grant basis, so I'm sure there'll be more to share on that, but I know that was implementation will be interesting, but it was a step in the right direction, and so it's a big deal in North Dakota. Paul?
Robin, just a question about that. That's the law that permits private organizations as well to apply for grants?
The private organizations would be the ones that deliver the curriculum. The dollars would follow the student based upon their financial need. So if a preschool were to have a child with a free and reduced lunch, they would get either $1,000 or $2,000, and it's up to those, this is where it gets sticky, those private entities, like one that I run, to cut the costs for all the other kids, for the students. The dollars don't go to the student, or the preschool student, or the family. They go to the provider.
Right. But my point is, it isn't just public education.
Correct. In fact, it's not really any public education at this point. It's all private providers. And so that's why this bill is such a conglomeration. It's like it's going to be interesting. Let's just put it that way.
And I don't mean to keep beating
No,
it up
go
here,
ahead.
but just to clarify it, it's the public money that is going to go to private providers. It's not necessarily going to come to the FBS or the Grand Forks Public Schools.
You are exactly right.
Kind of groundbreaking in a way.
Yes, yes, and some people were opposed to it because they thought it was resembling a step into the voucher system. Yes, they did. Yeah, so I know that's what you're getting at. So yes, that's indeed true. John?
Madam President, members of the board, all of us who were at EdClap recently, I just would be remiss not to plant a seed of a discussion that happened when I was there, and that's in the context of the times we're in, how they're changing. I would like us to just have a somewhat of a discussion, especially now when we're building a new school, and or looking at other schools or projects down the road, explore the realities or needs or approaches to a gender-neutral bathroom. If we could just put that on our radar.
It is now. Okay. Other than that, that's all I have. Next governance meeting is Tuesday, May 5th. So thank you for sharing, everybody, with your reports. Our next regular meeting of the board is May 12th. Any items for debriefing? I'll just say I'm surprised we're getting out of here this early. So, okay, we will see you soon. Meeting is adjourned.